Richard Hayes had one rule for surviving 15 years as a night watchman. Never expect anything. Empty buildings stay empty. Dark halls stay dark. Shadows are just shadows. Sounds are just pipes. He had built this rule slowly, carefully. The way you build a wall, one ordinary night stacked on top of another. Until the wall was so high, he couldn't imagine anything climbing over it. It was a good rule. It had kept him sane for 15 years. Tonight, the building was going to take that rule and quietly destroy it. The man nobody noticed Richard was the kind of man who disappeared in a crowd. Medium height, medium build, a face that was neither memorable nor forgettable. Just a face. The kind that belongs to someone who has learned that being noticed rarely leads anywhere good. He wore the same gray coat every night, carried the same black flashlight, walked the same route, the same pace with the same clipboard pressed against his chest like a small shield against the world. His wife called him steady. His 2 grown children called him distant. His doctor called him healthy for his age. Nobody called him special. That was exactly how Richard preferred it. He had taken the night watchman job 15 years ago because it asked nothing of him except presence. Show up. Walk the route. Initial the clipboard. Go home. No decisions. No pressure. No one depending on him for anything more complicated than confirming that an empty building remained empty. Simple work for a man who had decided, somewhere in his early 30s, that simple was enough. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the job had been arranged for him, that someone had made a phone call, that the manager who hired him had been expecting him specifically, that the keys he had been handed that first morning were not just keys to a building. They were an inheritance. But that understanding was still hours away. The building, the municipal city auditorium, had been many things in its life. In its glory days, the 50s and 60s, it had been the most important building in the city. Politicians stood on its stage and made promises. Orchestras filled it with sound on cold winter nights. Schoolchildren sat in its velvet seats and experienced, for the first time, the feeling of being part of something larger than their small daily lives. It was a building that made people feel significant. Then November 1987 happened. The official story was simple. Electrical fault, structural concerns, building condemned. The doors were locked. The velvet seats collected dust. The stage curtains slowly bled its color from deep crimson to dull brown. The city moved on with the casual cruelty of cities. A new concert hall opened 4 blocks away, and within a year nobody talked about the old auditorium anymore. It simply existed. Locked. Forgotten. Breathing quietly in the dark. Richard had been hired to make sure it stayed that way. Keep people out. That was the job. Walk the perimeter. Check the doors. Make sure no teenagers broke in to drink cheap beer in the balcony. No homeless man found a way through a cracked window. No urban explorer with a camera decided that a condemned auditorium made interesting content. Keep the outside world outside. Nobody had ever told him to worry about what was already inside. Las 9:47 p.m. The first round Richard pushed through the side entrance at exactly 9:47. The hinges screamed. They always screamed. The same 2-note protests every single night. And the smell hit him immediately. Old wood, damp stone, stale air that hadn't moved in decades. The smell of a place that had forgotten what fresh air felt like. He clicked on his flashlight. Left wall, right wall, ceiling, floor, nothing. The entrance hall was exactly as he had left it 24 hours ago. Same water stain on the left wall, shaped roughly like a sleeping dog. Same crack running diagonally across the ceiling plaster. Same layer of dust on the reception desk that no one had sat behind in 30 years. Richard initialed his clipboard. Entrance hole. Clear. He moved deeper into the building. The ground floor corridor stretched ahead of him, 6 doors on each side. All closed, all locked. He tried each handle as he passed. Locked. 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 He had done this so many times that his hand reached for each handle before his eyes found it, the way a pianist's fingers find keys. Without looking, nothing. 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 No instinct firing. No small hairs rising on the back of his neck. No sense that tonight was different from any of the 5,000 nights before it. The building was simply dark and cold and empty and dead. He finished the ground floor in 11 minutes. Initialed the clipboard. Moved to the staircase. Las 11:15 p.m. The second round always felt different from the first. By 11, the city outside had gone fully quiet. No traffic sounds bleeding through the walls. No distant music from the bar 2 streets over. Just Richard in the building and the particular quality of silence that only exists in large enclosed spaces late at night. A silence with weight and texture. A silence that presses gently against your eardrums as if testing whether you'll break first. Richard had learned to find it peaceful. He walked the balcony level slowly, flashlights sweeping across the rows of empty seats below. 800 of them, stretching back from the stage in long curved rows, each one a dark shape in the dark. From up here they looked almost like people, like an audience frozen mid-performance, waiting for something that was never going to come. He found the bird's nest in the far corner. Same as always. Abandoned. Whatever it built, it was long gone. He checked the projection booth. Padlocked. Cobwebs. Thick as curtains across the small window. He pressed his face to the glass and shone his flashlight inside. Old equipment. Dust. Nothing. He walked to the balcony railing and looked down at the stage. The curtain hung there in the dim. Massive. Still. The color of something that had once been vivid and had since forgotten how. Richard leaned on the railing and looked at it the way you look at something you have seen so many times it has become invisible. Then just for a second. Half a second. Barely long enough to be sure. The curtain moved. Not a dramatic sweep. Not a billow. Just the faintest shift. At the bottom edge. The kind of movement that could be a draft. Could be the building settling. Could be absolutely nothing at all. Richard stared hard. The curtain was completely still. He stayed at the railing longer than usual. Flashlight on the stage. Eyes on the curtain. Waiting. Nothing moved. He wrote on his clipboard, balcony. Clear. But his handwriting was slightly less steady than normal, and he took the stairs back down more slowly than he usually did. And for the first time in 15 years, a thought crossed his mind that he couldn't immediately dismiss. I am not alone in here. He shook it off, pushed it down, buried it under the weight of 5,000 ordinary nights. He went back downstairs. He told himself it was nothing. He was wrong. La 1:33. Ham the cold. The cold arrived without warning. Richard was halfway through his final round, moving along the ground floor corridor toward the main hall, when he stopped walking. Not because of anything he saw or heard, because of what he felt. The temperature had dropped sharply, not the gradual, even cold of a winter building cooling through the night. He knew that cold, lived inside it every shift, had made his peace with it years ago. This was different, sudden and specific, like stepping through an invisible line in the air. Like a door had opened somewhere close, and let something in. He stood still and checked the corridor around him. Both walls. 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 The window at the far end closed. Intact. Not even a hairline crack in the glass. The ceiling. The floor. No draft. No source. No explanation. Richard pulled his coat tighter and kept walking. His flashlight beam moved ahead of him on the floor. Steady hands. Steady pace. 15 years of ordinary nights telling him to keep moving. Keep breathing. Keep initialing the clipboard. He turned the corner, and his feet stopped working. La 1:34 am. The light was coming from beneath the main hall door. A thin line of pale yellow light running along the floor where the door met the frame. Barely visible. Barely there. The kind of thing you would miss if you weren't paying attention. If you were moving too fast. If your mind was somewhere else. Richard's mind was nowhere else. He stood completely still and looked at it and felt, for the first time in 15 years, the wall he had built collapse. One ordinary night falling off another. The whole careful structure coming down in total silence. His mind ran every rational explanation it had. Moonlight through a gap in the roof. He looked up solid ceiling. No gaps. A phone screen left on by he had swept the building 2 hours ago. Every entrance sealed. A reflection from his own flashlight. He switched it off. The light stayed. Soft. Steady. Unmoved by his flashlight going dark. Completely indifferent to whether he was standing here or not. Richard stood in that corridor in the pitch dark and looked at that thin, pale line of impossible light and understood, with the quiet certainty of a man who has just run out of explanations, that his 15 years of ordinary nights were over. Whatever was behind that door had been waiting a long time, and it had just heard him coming. He reached out his hand, put his palm flat against the door. Pushed. The door swung open. And there it was. Center stage, alone in the massive dark, a single candle burning in a heavy brass holder. Flame perfectly straight, perfectly still, throwing just enough pale light to show Richard that he was not the only thing in this auditorium that had been waiting. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he walked toward it. The book. He climbed onto the stage, old wood groaning under his boots. The candle flame didn't move. Not when he stepped. Not when he breathed. Not when he crouched down beside it. Beside the candle was a book. Large. Old. Dark leather cracked like the skin of something ancient. No title. No name. Just worn leather and brass corners eaten green by decades of damp air. It was open. Richard read by candlelight. Small, dense handwriting. Every line pressed close to the next, like the writer was afraid of space. This auditorium was never built for performances. It was built to remember what this city chose to forget. He turned the page carefully. A list of dates. All November. All years apart. Busy day each one. A number of people. Growing each time. November 14th, 1987. 41 attended. The last. He turned to the final written page. The ink here was darker. Pressed harder. Urgent. The watchman comes when it gets cold enough. He always finds this book. He always reads this far. Now he makes a choice. Close the book and walk away, or lift it and understand everything. Richard looked down. The book was not resting on the stage floor. It was resting on a door. Below the stage, a trapdoor. Edges flush with the wood, almost invisible. The iron latch pulled to one side, not fully closed. Cold air moved through the gap. Real cold. Living cold. The kind that only comes from open space. Richard pulled it open. Stairs went down into the dark. He turned on his flashlight and descended, counting each step under his breath. 14 steps. At the bottom, a low brick room. Dirt floor packed, smooth as stone. The ceiling close enough to make him duck at the entrance. And in the center of the room, arranged in a perfect circle, 41 chairs. Each one facing inward. Each one with a small folded paper on its seat. On one chair, just one, with nothing on it at all. Empty. Waiting. Richard picked up the nearest paper. Unfolded. Italiano. A name. A date. November 14th, 1987. And one word beside it. Witnessed. He went around the full circle and read every name. Most he didn't recognize. But 3 stopped him completely. The city's former mayor, his own building manager. The man who had hired him, handed him his keys, and never once mentioned a basement existed. And the third name, his father's. What his father left behind. Richard sat down on the cold dirt floor. His father had been a quiet man. Careful. A city records worker who measured every word before speaking it. He had died 11 years ago and left behind nothing unusual, or so Richard had believed his entire life. He sat there for a long time in that circle of 41 chairs and thought about his father's face, the way he sometimes stood at the window at night and looked at nothing, the way he had once put his hand on Richard's shoulder completely out of nowhere and said, "Some things are locked for a reason, son. The kindest thing a man can do is respect the lock." Richard had thought it was just one of his father's odd sayings. Now he understood it was a confession. He reached into his coat pocket, took out his pen, tore a page from his clipboard notepad. He wrote his own name, tonight's date, and one word. Witnessed. He folded it once, walked to the empty chair, placed it on the seat. The moment he let go of the paper, the candle upstairs went out. He heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like a silence that hadn't been there before. The absence of a small flame that had been burning patiently for God knows how long, waiting for exactly this. The job was done. The circle was complete. The last round, Richard climbed back up the 14 steps, crossed the dark stage, walked a long aisle between 800 empty seats, pushed through the side door into the cold night air. He sat in his car and looked at the building through the windshield. He thought about 41 names. One empty chair that had always been his. A father who had quietly arranged an entire life. A job, a building, a set of keys so that his son would one day walk down 14 steps and understand something that couldn't be explained out loud. Idrovelmi. He lay beside his sleeping wife and stared at the ceiling until morning. He never told a single person what he found, but he went back the next night. And the night after, because the book had said the watchman always comes when it gets cold enough. And Richard finally understood he wasn't just a watchman who had stumbled onto a secret. He was the secret's next guardian, chosen before he was old enough to choose himself, by the one man who had known him longest and trusted him most. Some fathers leave money, some leave wisdom. Richard's father left him a locked building, 14 steps, and the truth the city buried. It was, in the end, the greatest gift he had ever received.